everybody, and welcome. It is Shadow at Night for Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. Before we begin tonight, I would like to give a warm, loving birthday greeting to my son, Matthew, who is turning 40 today. 40, I know. It's crazy. But I was 20 years old when he was born. So, happy birthday, my boy. I love you very much, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Maybe Thanksgiving. Grandma's been talking about it. John Carpay is on the show tonight, president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. We have a lot to cover tonight, including liberal bills C8 and C9 that could, I suppose, wipe out free speech in this country. They've been trying to do this now for the past, 4 or 5 years, and they're trying again. I often wonder, what's their motivation? Of course, we know their motivation. Maybe there's some newcomers to the show tonight that don't know exactly what's going on. And if that's the case, feel free to ask questions in comments. You are always welcome to do so, my friends. Let's see who's watching tonight on all the different platforms. On Rumble, we have Daisy May and Cosford, Seacross Notable, World Peace, Goshi 26, Lawrence Green, Little Purple Stone, Dyson's there as well. Over on Rumble, no, not Rumble, we just checked Rumble. Over on Facebook, it's Shelley and Lulu and Luella, Clint watching in Hannah, Alberta. That's the home of Lanny McDonald, I think. Lucette is watching in Saint Jean Baptiste on Facebook. On YouTube, remote viewer 57, asking, we still have free speech? Technically, yes, we do. There's this thing called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I know there's a lot of people that say the liberals use it to wipe their butts, but hey, you want to know what we have to? Justice Center, Constitutional Freedoms. This is what John does. Roseanne is watching tonight. Tony is watching on YouTube from Coldstream, British Columbia. Kev from Canada, Nano-silver is on Facebook. Cassandra, John in Dufferin, Manitoba. Linda's watching in Stratford, Ontario. Whatever platform you are watching on tonight, wherever you happen to be watching, please give a like and a share. Let's get this out to as many people as we possibly can. Again, John Carpay, Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, joins the show right after this break. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is brought to you by Canada, Nano-silver.com.
I've been struggling with acne for a while, and my mom brought me SilverCeuticals, and I did not want to try it at first because I hate all that stuff on my face. But I'm super glad I did because it hydrates my skin, doesn't leave me dry. I don't use coconut oil on it anymore. And I'm super glad my mom showed me it, and I'm glad she's showing other people because I think it does wonders. Some of the other things I love about SilverCeuticals is that it's natural, it's not a pharmaceutical, and it just makes your skin glow and feel super hydrated. You don't feel like dry at all, and it just keeps that way for the entire day, and that's awesome. I've had a few people comment on how my face has cleared up. It's mostly been family members, and once my mom told them what I was using, they finally started using it too, and they're seeing great results as well. If a kid told me that they were struggling with skin issues, I would 100% recommend SilverCeuticals because it fixes everything and it's amazing.
CanadaNanoSilver.com, 204-808-9292. Hello, John. Thank you for joining once again. Good to have you back.
Just glancing off to the side, reading up more on the horrors of Bill C8, but I'm really glad to be with you and your viewers and your listeners this evening.
We forgot to mention the horrors of Bill C9 as well. That one's equally as disturbing. Before we get into these two bills, which I guess resemble C63, the Trudeau Liberals had in place or tried to have in place a couple of years ago, we have to talk about truth and reconciliation. Today is the day, after all. It's a national holiday, for goodness sakes.
It is, and I released a video this morning saying that truth and reconciliation are both worthwhile and they should be pursued. And we are not going to get reconciliation when we put out false claims or misleading claims, nor are we going to get reconciliation if we have race-based policies like in British Columbia where non-Aboriginals cannot, or non-Indigenous, whichever term, cannot access some public parks in British Columbia. So if you are African Canadian, Asian Canadian, European Canadian, whatever kind of non-Aboriginal that you are, you cannot get into public parks. It's a racist policy, and things like that are not the way to move forward towards reconciliation between different ethnicities. So that's gotten like 15,000 views. That was a few hours ago. It's probably got more now.
Very nice. You know, it's interesting that they keep trying to force this. I guess it's DEI on steroids on us. From CP24 in Ontario, Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board told to change flag policy to mark Truth and Reconciliation Day. They had already voted that the only flags they were going to allow on school grounds were the Canadian flag, the provincial flag, and I believe the municipality flag. And they were taking all other flags down. But the education minister ordered them last week to put that flag back up. What's going on with the governments in this country? Like virtue signaling. Insane.
Well, too many woke people elected, and the non-woke majority has to wake up a bit more and see to it that we start winning some elections at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels, because I actually think most Canadians don't support these racist policies, like the BC Parks policy, where again, it's not every park in the province, but if it's one park, that's too many, where you actually get turned away. You cannot enter the park unless you are the correct race, and some people get upset about the word race, but okay, the correct ethnicity, the correct ancestry, the correct descent. I'm sure, without having done any polling, I'm sure the overwhelming majority of people in British Columbia don't support race-based access to provincial parks. They should be available to all members of the public. And so, it's that majority has to elect people. And it's the same with, like, at a school board, most parents do not want their 5-year-old son, Johnny, being told that he might be a girl and that he could become a girl if he wants to, and he might not really be a boy. It's like, no, don't tell my 5-year-old son that, but it's that majority that is often not active in the democratic process and stays home and doesn't vote and is not involved. And you have this kind of woke minority that exercises an awful lot of power federally, provincially, municipally, and at the school board level.
I tend to agree with you. I'm not sure if you've seen the Leger poll today. I'm going to get into this later on in the show, but they're saying that 38% of Canadians, out of a poll of 1,600 people, this is larger than normal, say that Canada First belongs to the Indigenous peoples. Now, I think that's got the Canadian Nudge team's fingerprints all over it, but I don't. If that's the way Canadians feel, then we should just give this country back. It's like, just give it back already.
If the way that question is worded, though, you could have somebody who is adamantly opposed to racist policies that treat people differently according to their ethnicity, but as a kind of a general philosophical, historical recognition that Canada First belongs to Indigenous people. I mean, I don't know if you get a full 38% that would be okay with policy like in British Columbia, where non-Aboriginals are denied admission into public parks.
There's a lot of virtue signaling out there, though, John. I mean, a lot of orange T-shirts I saw today, and I was disappointed by that. Not because I'm against reconciliation or truth or any of that stuff, just because there has been so many stories told, especially in the past 10 years. Some true, maybe, some not. They're looking for bodies in a waste dump in Winnipeg. They haven't been digging for any bodies in Kamloops. After how long has it been? 5 or 6 years now, where they had us fly our flags at half-mast for what seemed like forever.
It's been more than 4 years. The Kamloops Indian Band announced in May of 2021 that they had found the remains of 215 children. The truth was they had done ground-penetrating radar, which will beep for any anomaly. It could be a tree stump, it could be a stone, it could be an irrigation pipe. Any anomaly will set it off. It is simply not capable of identifying human remains. Now, a skeleton would also set it off, but so would an irrigation pipe or a tree stump or a stone or a rock. So they were given $12 million, $12.1 million by the federal government I don't know if they got that money in 2021 or 2022, but they got the 12.1 million and have not done any excavating. That 12.1 million was given specifically for excavation, because that's the only way. You have to excavate the area and see if you find some skeletons. And I would add, if you
of them, 250,
215 children. I mean, it's a fabrication. Now, I would concede there is a tiny chance that it might be true, but why are they not doing the excavation? Where is their love for truth? It's like they got all this political mileage out of the unsubstantiated claim that there's 215 bodies of children buried here, and the prime minister goes ape and lowers the flags go down for 161 days. Churches are burned to the ground across Canada, arson, so hate crimes against churches. And here we are 4 years later, they have not done an excavation. Their refusal, their unwillingness to do an excavation suggests that the claim was false. Does it prove that the claim was false? No, it doesn't prove it, but it strongly suggests that the claim of 215 bodies is a false claim. Yes. And if it's not false, why don't you do the excavation? Let's find out.
And if you're lying about this, then what else have you been lying about? I got into an interesting conversation with a First Nations dude a few years ago near the Manitoba legislature. They had some teepees set up. They were protesting on the east side of the building. And so I took the opportunity. I was down there to talk to a couple of these guys, had a relatively reasonable conversation, but one guy came out of one of the tents on site and said, "I don't agree with you at all. They're bringing bodies back now. They're talking about bringing bodies back now. I want to see my loved ones again." And I said, nobody has done any excavation there. Where are you hearing this from? Please give me your source. And then he grumbled, yelled, gave me the finger, and walked away. And so this is a culture that is based a lot on passing stories down from generation to generation to generation. I think that we can acknowledge, all of us can acknowledge that. And so having said that, how much of that is true and how much is not? You know what I mean? I mean, I know you don't like to get into speculation here, but if we're talking about stories, I don't know what all of this residential school stuff is actually based upon, except for somebody's writings or stories that have been passed down from generations within that culture.
Well, let's assume that it's a fact that the majority of Aboriginals that attended residential schools, that they were treated poorly. And let's just assume that that's a fact. Okay. And we don't hear from people that speak positively, by the way, because the back around the year 2000, 2001, the Alberta Report magazine interviewed Aboriginals who said that they were grateful for their residential school experience. They said if we hadn't gone to residential schools, the person would say things like, "I would never have learned to speak English. I would never have learned to read and write. And I've had a successful career because I went to a residential school and I got an education that I would not have gotten if I had stayed on the reserve." And so there was today, I think, I shudder to think of what would happen to an Aboriginal person who spoke positively about his or her experiences. There was already a lot of pressure 20 years ago, but now you've got this daily propaganda about the horrors, which I think in some cases, perhaps many, I'm not accusing anybody of lying. I mean, if somebody says that they were treated horribly in a residential school, who am I to disagree with them? That's their experience. However, I also think that people who had a positive experience are not going to feel very free today to talk about having had a positive experience at the residential school. But even if nobody had a positive experience, the way forward is not by doing things like, first of all, lying is not helpful, especially on, if you're supposed to be about truth and reconciliation. If you're about truth, don't come out with this unsubstantiated claim that you've got the bodies of 215 children when all you've done is ground penetrating radar, and it may have beeped because of some irrigation pipes and tree stumps and rocks. Okay, that's not truth. To come out and if you want to make a claim like that, you got to back it up. So on the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, what the Kamloops Indian band, they've got some, I don't know their pronunciation formally, it's just shorthand reference. That's not right. And that's not how you get reconciliation, by putting out false claims.
Corey Morgan, our friend, Western Standard journalist, was doing an expose, let's just say, on, was it Siksika? Siksika. Right.
That's how I hear it pronounced here in Alberta. That's a common pronunciation. I don't know if it's correct, but it's Siksika.
Siksika. Okay, so he was through that reservation, stayed on all the public roads and highways, and videoed his experience going through there, and was issued 2 tickets by the government of that nation for what? Trespassing, they said. How is that even possible?
It's political intimidation, and so the Justice Center is funding lawyers to provide representation to Corey Morgan. We're gonna plead not guilty and set a trial date, and maybe they'll withdraw the tickets prior to trial. That's up to the Crown prosecutor to decide. But if we proceed to trial, our lawyers will have opportunity to present arguments about there's no, it's not private property. It's not like somebody, if you live on an acreage outside of town, but it is private property. Just because there's a road there doesn't mean I can drive on it. But then you would put up a sign saying private property, no trespassing. The Siksika Reserve is analogous to a municipality, and you can drive through the municipality. There's no sign there saying private property. You have to be a resident of this reserve in order to be here. So all of that will come out at trial. If we go to trial, I mean, what I've seen, the federal government never wanted to have a trial on the ArriveCan app, and they didn't want their policies to go to trial because they would lose, because there's no science to back up these federal policies during the lockdown years.
Yeah, exactly. So all the best to Corey, by the way. He was actually, I don't want to call it an expose. I think he was just recording what he saw as he drove through there, and what he happened to catch was a lot of poverty and a lot of squalor. And because of that, I guess the government, the chiefs, the band was offended, and they sent him these tickets to teach him a lesson, which is a kind of a sad commentary on our society today. We have to move on to Bill C8, Bill C9, John. These are 2 bills that could pretty much strip all public speech away from Canadians. Have they worded these bills, and I know you've had a look at them, have they worded these bills in such a way that they would be difficult to prove their unconstitutionality?
Bill C8 is about the amendments to the Telecommunications Act. Telecommunications, the definition is basically anything non-paper. So the internet, podcasts, videocasts, emails, all of that is telecommunications. So a new power given to the Minister of Public Safety is that if he feels that there's any threat, but threat is not defined. If there's a threat to telecommunications in Canada, and that could include interference, manipulation, disruption, degradation, none of these are defined, he can then order an internet provider to temporarily or permanently stop providing a service to any individual. So what this means is that the minister could see some content on the internet, like maybe this podcast videocast that we are doing right now, and the minister could think that our, your podcast, your show is disruptive or degrading or manipulative, and order your internet provider to stop providing services to Shadow Davis, and Further, another section of Bill C8, the minister may order internet service provider to do a specific thing or to refrain from doing a specific thing. Now, all of this is based on a standard whereby the minister has if the minister has a reasonable grounds to believe that there's a threat to telecommunications. That's pretty vague. I mean, reasonable as defined by whom and what is the threat? And so this is giving power to the minister. And these orders can be secret, by the way. So the minister could order your internet service provider to cut off Shadow Davis because you are what you're doing is posing a threat to telecommunications in Canada because the minister feels that you're being manipulative, disruptive, or there's degradation, all of it undefined.
Degradation
and then,
to what? Like what?
Well,
what am I degrading?
Maybe it was, maybe there was degradation when we didn't follow the truth and reconciliation narrative the way that the government would want us to follow that narrative. Who knows?
So we just degraded all First Nations in Canada, and therefore we must be hauled off toot sweet. Yeah, okay.
And this can be a secret order, so you're not allowed to talk about it. You could get into further trouble if you talked about the order. So you couldn't even tell your friends, hey, I got kicked off the internet. Well, you'd have to phone your friends, I guess, if you were truly cut off. You couldn't send emails anymore, but maybe you could go next door to your neighbor and have your neighbor send out emails or something. But then that could be illegal if the order says that it has to remain secret. So this is very broad, extremely broad power. Other provisions, so you can have the secret termination of essential services. There's nothing for due process or judicial review. The judges can rely on secret evidence that people are not allowed to see. And it's just full of vagueness, but it gives the minister these powers to issue secret orders compelling telecommunications providers or internet providers to do or not do whatever the minister wants. So just horrific.
Clearly, this has not been worded in a way that would be difficult to fight in court. Like they are definitely impinging upon the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and our freedom of speech.
Usually the best way to mount a court challenge against legislation is to have an actual person who got a ticket or who got a fine. That's usually the best way because you've got a concrete case. And right. If you don't have that, if you're fighting the government in the abstract, it's easier for the government to win. This particular bill is so bad that it would probably be worthwhile to challenge it as soon as it is proclaimed into force, even before we have a proper applicant who has standing because he or she got a ticket. It is so poorly worded.
Now, they've only just introduced this bill into the House of Commons, so it's got a ways to go to make it through unless they try to slam it through, and they have done that in the past with other types of bills. I'm not sure if they could do it with this one. It's got to go through first reading, second reading. It's got to go to the Senate. They've got to do first reading, second reading, possible committee. So this could be, they've been trying this for years, John, as you know.
But it's a fresh start of what could be a 4-year mandate. Now, what's a little bit different in this parliament, in the previous parliament, we had the NDP led by Jagmeet Singh was always voting with the Liberals, and the Liberals governed pretty much as though they had a majority. And the NDP supported Bill C-63, which of course has now died, but they could bring it back. But that was the Online Harms Act with a lot of horrible provisions in it. This time it's a little bit different. The NDP, I think, has learned its lesson from the election that it shouldn't be, saying go Liberals go and be the cheerleaders with the red pom-poms, always supporting the government. I think they've learned their lesson. However, to defeat this, you would need the NDP and the Bloc both would have to join the Conservatives to vote down the legislation. And then you get into this whole election readiness thing, because the Liberal government could say, well, it's a confidence vote. So if you vote down this bill, we're going to determine that that is a vote of no confidence in the government, which will trigger an election. And so, that's sort of something that the Liberals could counter with that and say, well, we'll turn it into a confidence vote. And then the question becomes, are the Bloc and the NDP, do they have enough money in their bank accounts right now to be able to go to the people in an election? And if one of the parties is scared of an election, they're going to abstain, and this could still get through. The other more important thing, though, is for people to contact their own MP, because even Liberal MPs, if they get a lot of pushback on C8 from their own constituents, they're going to have second thoughts.
I hope so. But again, it's like the difference between, and we've seen this before, voting in favor of what your constituents want or voting against your boss, your party, right? I mean, you can't do that if you're being whipped into voting a certain way. Let's move to C9 now. This is the hate bill. We've got Sean Fraser. He's been the housing minister. What else was he? What other files has he screwed up? Now he's the Minister of Justice and the AG. And here's what he had to say.
We also have realized through many conversations with those impacted by hate crimes in Canada that hate is not limited to the doorsteps of our religious institutions, but is prevalent throughout the entirety of our communities. We see it in our streets, we see it in our parks, we see it in our grocery stores. Frankly, we see it almost everywhere. In addition to the campaign commitments around the crimes of obstruction and intimidation, we are moving forward with establishing a new crime of hate. This will operate by layering on top of existing criminal offenses with a new offense that will specifically target hate where that crime was committed because of their motivation of hatred towards the victim. You can imagine that it may be more morally culpable for a person who assaults another, not just because of a personal problem they may have, but because of their belonging to a community. If a person robs a store because the owner comes from a particular group, or if a person commits harassment against someone who is seeking to attend university classes merely because they belong to a particular community of faith or race. This behavior is not just morally culpable. The impact has reverberations through the entirety of a community, and I would argue tears at the seams of the social fabric of the nation.
Yeah, so has anybody defined exactly what hate is yet, aside from being a human feeling?
You almost have to laugh whenever politicians or even the judges on the Supreme Court, when they try to define hatred, they just trip all over themselves, and they do triple backflips and weird contortions and try to pretend that this is really clear and obvious when it isn't. So one of the provisions in C9, it tries to give a little bit more definition to hate. So get this. Dislike and disdain is not hate. However, vilification and detestation is hate. You can discredit, humiliate, hurt, offend people. Okay, you can discredit, humiliate, hurt, and offend. That is not hate. And disdain and dislike is not hate. But do not cross into the zone of detestation and vilification. So it's an emotion. And the other crucial thing is that criminal code already, section 718 of the criminal code already empowers judges to impose a more severe sentence on a criminal. So after conviction, I mean, prior to conviction, they're not looking into it, whether there's hate or not. But if somebody murder, robbery, sexual assault, whatever, any kind of crime, shoplifting. So when at the time of sentencing, if the crime was motivated by hate, the judge can impose a more severe sentence. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is debatable, but that's already in the criminal code right now. So if you rob a store, let's say a convenience store, in the middle of the night, you walk in there with a knife or a gun or a baseball bat or something, and you order, give me all your cash, otherwise I'll kill you. If you take it to the next level, and let's say that the clerk is Korean or Somali or East Indian or whatever, and you start saying a lot of racial slurs, you could get a harsher sentence. That's already the law. Now, what this does is it takes that existing discretion that judges already have, okay, and it puts it on steroids, and they can actually increase the penalty from where the maximum penalty was 2 years, it can become 5. Where the maximum penalty was 5 years, the maximum penalty now becomes 10 years. Where the maximum penalty was 14 years, the judge can impose a life sentence because of the addition of hate. So it takes an existing provision and puts it on steroids, makes it much bigger than what it was.
John, what are and I'm not going to ask for all of them, I'm sure there's many, but you're aware of most of the hate crime laws in effect in Canada right now. And are they even constitutional? I mean, you can hate somebody or something and suddenly you're guilty of a crime. It just makes no sense at all to me.
Well, the hate speech provision, section 319 of the criminal code, it's a criminal offense to willfully promote hatred against an identifiable group in public. So private conversations are exempt, but identifiable group as per their race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, vaccination status doesn't count, profession doesn't count. So you can willfully promote hatred against people that didn't get the COVID shot. You can willfully promote hatred against bankers and lawyers, but don't willfully promote hatred against Jews or Muslims or gay people. So
wait a minute, hold on. How are Jews identifiable from anybody else? And well,
if you're on the internet saying that Jews are, blankety blankety blank and the world would be a better place without them, that potentially you could face a criminal charge for hate speech, whether Jews are identifiable or not. But if you say bad things about Jews or Muslims or Christians or gay people or women or old people, age, you can't say that all the old people should all be euthanized because they're all terrible. I mean, that could be, you could face hate speech charges for that.
So those are the laws on the books right now?
They were narrowly upheld as constitutional by the Supreme Court, but it was a tight decision. It was 4-3. Beverly McLaughlin and 2 other justices said that the hate speech laws were unreasonable, unjustified violations of free expression, and so it was a narrow decision. So they have been on the books. But it's not a crime to hate somebody, but it could become a crime if you willfully promote hatred against an identifiable group. And then what this bill does is it removes the current restriction. Normally for a crime, it's the local police, the local crown prosecutors, they make a decision whether to prosecute or not, right? And police and prosecutors have a discussion, and ultimately the crown prosecutor decides. For the hate speech, it has to be reviewed and approved by the Attorney General of the province, right? So if you say you live in Manitoba, so the Attorney General of Manitoba has to be reviewed and approved. He or she has to give a green light to say, yes, we're going to proceed with this hate speech prosecution. That provision is getting turfed if Bill C-9 passes. So it's going to unleash a flood of where the police and crown prosecutors locally, they just make their own decisions. And if they feel something's hateful, they can proceed to prosecute. And the process is the punishment. So you might be acquitted at the end of the day. It no longer needs to go before the Attorney General for a review. So that is one of the worst aspects of Bill C-9.
So again, we have to go back to what is hate, because one man's hate is another man's whatever. Like I could say, I hate the Edmonton Oilers, or I hate the Buffalo Bills, whatever, right? And somebody out there who may be a Bills fan or an Oilers fan could take exception to that, because I believe that this one can be reported anonymously as well. Am I correct in saying that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, there's no, particularly something posted on the internet, right? If the police get wind of it, they can say, look, get a secretary at the police department will swear an affidavit that he or she saw this on the internet, and it doesn't really matter who the complainant was. And it is subjective. You take this slogan that we've heard a lot since October 7th, 2 years ago with the massacre of civilians in Israel by Hamas. And there's a slogan, it's been around for a long time, but it goes, quote, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," end of quote. Now, I know some Jewish people, they say that it's definitely anti-Semitic, it's definitely hateful, it's saying that there should be no Israel, that the Jews should be driven out, probably killed, and so on. Okay, and other people say, no, it's a political slogan, it's pro-Palestine, it means that there should be a Palestinian state and Palestine should be free, but we're not talking about exterminating Jews or ethnic cleansing. There's a perfect example of what can be seen as hateful or not hateful by people who will disagree on that.
I'm not understanding how they can legislate feelings. And, it really makes people, and I believe this is probably designed this way, makes people want to walk on eggshells and really watch what they say in public and online, right?
And it's very political. Sean Fraser, when he was introducing this, he said that this is a response to rising anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, transphobia, and homophobia. Conspicuous by its absence, he says nothing about the dozens of Christian churches that have been burned to the ground in recent years, especially since that May 2021, the Kamloops Indian ban making this probably false claim of 215 bodies of children discovered, and then Prime Minister lowering the flags at half-mast, and the media unthinkingly repeating the allegation as fact. And now you've got, corporations and universities and everybody's repeating this as a fact when it's a claim that's probably false. So, but the minister says nothing about the burning of churches, right? He's saying, well, we got to have this new legislation because of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, transphobia, and homophobia. And again, it's all very subjective, okay? Because if a transgender person or a gay person gets assaulted, that's illegal. It's criminal offense, right? So what we need to do is apply the law equally for everybody, but we don't need this new legislation.
So what happens if I or anybody else goes online and says, by the way, trans kids don't exist. There's no such thing as transgender. It's delusional. It's a mental illness. That could probably land me in hot water.
Well, see, here's the thing. You talk about walking on eggshells. See, this is going to chill your speech, because if that is, whether it's your opinion or not, but if somebody wants to go on the internet and say transgender doesn't exist and it's a mental illness, they might want to think twice, because maybe you could face hate crime, willful promotion of hatred against based on gender identity, gender expression. So there could be a problem there, although that's a problem that's already existed since 2017, when that legislation was amended to add gender identity and gender expression were added as grounds to race, religion, age, so on and so forth. Yeah. But the local police and local Crown prosecutors will now have this new discretion to prosecute, which previously had to first be reviewed by the Attorney General before prosecution could go ahead.
Do you see a day, John, when, like in the UK, I'm sure you've seen many of the videos from the UK where you've got police knocking on doors. There was a recent one that came out, a couple of female cops knocking on somebody's door claiming that they need to seize a cell phone because this woman's daughter had looked at a social media post. Do you see that coming here if these laws are passed?
Sure. Very easily and very quickly. If you combine the Bill C2, which they call the Strong Borders Act, but it should be called the Strong Surveillance Act, all kinds of provisions there that allow governments to seize computers or to look at computers without a warrant. Here, the minister can order the production of information without a warrant. Okay, this is sort of going back to C8. Under Bill C8, the Minister of Public Safety can issue an order, that you, Shadow Davis, I want you to turn over this or this. I want you to do this. I want you to refrain from doing that. this amounts to a search power without a warrant. And and Bill C2 has got all kinds of search powers given to government where they can search without a warrant. Why this is important, and Canada Post,
they've sold that
if they're
bill.
working.
I'm sorry, John. They've sold that Bill C2 as something to strengthen the borders, right? To stop all of these.
And there are sections of it to strengthen the borders, but they've added in a whole bunch of stuff has nothing to do with borders, right? Like the Authorized Access to Information Act is a part of C2 that gives government officials of all kinds, not just police, this right to demand information without a warrant. And it's and gives Canada Post can open up letter mail without a warrant. And this is really dangerous because we've got a 158-year-old tradition in Canada where the starting point is we have privacy rights and property rights, and they cannot be infringed by police unless and until the police, they have to go before the court with an affidavit sworn saying that, let's say Mark Smith, no offense to any Mark Smiths that are listening, but we think that Mark Smith is possessing and distributing child pornography on his computer. And so we want to do surveillance on we want to get into his computer system, and we want to monitor his emails, and we want to bust into his home when he's not suspecting it and arrest him and take his computer. But they have to swear an affidavit on which they can subsequently be cross-examined if there's any falsehoods in it. And then the judge can read the affidavit and say, okay, well, you get a search warrant. It's limited only to Mark Smith, and there's certain terms and conditions. That's the way we've been doing it for 158 years. We've been respecting privacy rights, property rights, while still giving police the power to do some good law enforcement, but by targeting a search warrant at one person or maybe one criminal gang or something, right? So warrantless searches are a huge problem that is leading us to a police state.
So between C2, C8, and C9, we could find ourselves in a very authoritarian situation very, very quickly.
Yeah, because and then C63, which has not yet been reintroduced, but we've heard, C63 can get you under house arrest wearing an ankle bracelet based on a neighbor's suspicion that you might commit a speech crime. Bill C63, the Online Harms Act, which may be reintroduced, also has provisions to empower the Canadian Human Rights Commission to, it just broadens the definition of hate way beyond what's already pretty vague in the criminal code. So if that's reintroduced, you have Bill 2, 8, 9, and a new version of C63, we will be very likely just like the United Kingdom and have police knocking on the doors of Canadians because their speech is deemed to be Islamophobic or homophobic or transphobic or anti-Semitic or whatever.
There's a lot of people who have been messaging me in the last few days. Shadow, you haven't talked about any of these things. I said, relax, I'm having John Carpay on soon. We're going to cover all of this stuff. You've been talking about the ostrich farm. I say, yeah, I know. They're saying that's a distraction. I have been bringing these things up, but the way you talk about them this evening, John, these things are like terrifying. And everybody in this country right now should be chilled to the bone. Wow.
Well, people should contact their MP. And I don't care if your MP is Liberal, Conservative, Bloc, Green, NDP. I think I've got all 5 parties in the House right now because they need to hear from their constituents. Now, the nature of our democracy, it's the Conservatives are probably going to vote against all these bills anyway because they're the opposition, but they should still hear from their constituents to enlighten and inform that MPs become more informed about these issues. But for the other parties, if the NDP and the Bloc and the Conservatives are all against this bill, then it can't pass. And if there's 1 or 2 or 10 or 20 or 30 Liberals that are against this because it's such an assault on privacy and civil liberties, we have to contact our own member of Parliament and tell him or her what our concerns are.
This is going to call for speculation. and you feel free to not speculate, but why are they doing this? I mean, I ask these questions, and with every level we get to, I always have to say, why? What is the rationale behind this? Because these people, by and large, I mean, I've met some stupid politicians, I'll be honest, but I'd say that these people, by and large, are not stupid. They've read the wording of these bills. They understand what they're trying to force through Parliament. They know what they're doing. So I have to ask, why? Like, do they want to be authoritarians?
Yes, they want to enforce a woke ideology. And when you have free speech, you can preach your own ideology, and you can try to persuade people, right? So if I'm woke and I want to get you to love equity, diversity, inclusion, and blah, 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 I can persuade you and try and come over, but I can't really force you. And so when you get rid of the free speech, then you can force this agenda on Canadians, and you can say, well, we've got these woke ideas. Everything's about equity, diversity, inclusion, and everything's about group rights, and everything's about oppression. And so our whole universe, we're looking at it through the lens that everything's all about oppression, and men are oppressing women, and straight people are oppressing gay people, and colonizers are oppressing Aboriginals, and Jews are oppressing Muslims in the Middle East, and et cetera. Everything's all about oppression. Now, again, I'm a free speech advocate. I think anybody wants to promote that doctrine, like, go ahead and promote it. But you see, now you've got a lot of people in government and in law societies, the medical establishment, the bureaucracies, federal, provincial, municipal bureaucracies. You have lots and lots of people who believe this stuff, and now they want to impose it. So one way to impose it, right, is through this kind of legislation. You can silence people who disagree with woke ideology, who are going to say, no, I believe in the dignity of every human being. I believe in free speech. I believe in freedom of religion. I believe that the state should be our servant, not our master. Blah, blah, blah. Like, you can use the power of the state to silence your enemies. And so it appears to be that this is where we're going, where the government can, turn off your internet if they don't like what you're saying.
This is Marxism. This is totalitarian dictatorship.
Neo-Marxism. The old Marxism was capitalist versus proletariat. The new Marxism, it broadens out the oppression, that it's all about men oppressing women, and light-skinned people oppressing dark-skinned people. Everything's about oppression.
Yeah, critical theory and whatnot. And, I wonder why more people, especially the Conservative Party of Canada, this is something I was talking about on the show last night, as a matter of fact, because Poilievre was caught on camera a couple of years ago when he was out doing the hustings with Jamil Giovanni in Oshawa, where he called Trudeau a Marxist. He was talking to a woman, it got caught on camera. Global News did this big thing about Poilievre calling Trudeau a Marxist, and then they brought on some university professor saying, no, he's not a Marxist, even though he has economic policies that resemble Karl Marx. He's not a Marxist. But I thought, it's time to start calling this stuff out for what it is. And yet, for some reason, the one hope that we have, politically speaking, the Conservative Party of Canada, at this stage of the game, still refuses to tell the truth. Why do you think that is?
You'd have to ask the Conservative MPs,
I know,
and especially the leader, what they're thinking. What was the Conservative Party thinking when they joined the woke folk in denouncing the Alternative for Deutschland, the AfD, which is a conservative, small c conservative party that anybody can go online, read their platform, and it reads like, somewhere halfway between the Conservative Party of Canada and the US Republican Party. But it's kind of a run-of-the-mill, small c conservative party. And you get Pierre Poilievre joins the CBC in calling it, far right.
Yeah.
By the way, the CBC, I had a column on this recently. Anybody who disagrees with the CBC is far right. I mean, you could be a conservative, you're far right. You could be a libertarian, far right. You could be a anti-Marxist, non-Marxist, you're far right. Everybody's far right. They said Charlie Kirk was far right. Charlie Kirk was a U.S. Republican who had predictable positions, predictable beliefs about abortion, about affirmative action, about quotas, about the economy, about national security, about whatever. Conservative, yes. Libertarian, perhaps. Far right, the CBC denounces Charlie Kirk as being a fascist, and right. So if you disagree with them, you're far right fascist. And it was disappointing to see Pierre Poilievre joining the CBC, the Liberals, the NDP, in denouncing a conservative party in Germany.
Yeah,
it's just ridiculous.
Well, Pierre Poilievre and his party were all over the Truth and Reconciliation today, and whatever Indigenous members they have in that party were all over the internet today saying, well, truth and reconciliation, it's time for our country to come together in love and peace. And I agree with all of that. They're just doing it wrong. But we've already
I agree with that too. We should be coming together in love and peace, but we don't do that by divisive race-based laws. It creates resentment. Okay. Yeah. If you're Aboriginal and I'm not, and you've got special hunting and fishing rights, or if your kid gets an extra $5,000 for going to university and my kid doesn't get that, or, if you have exclusive Aboriginal access to a public park and I don't, any of that, maybe you and I would still be friends in spite of that. But, in terms of social harmony, you don't get social harmony by giving people different rights based on their ethnicity or ancestry.
You certainly don't. One more thing, John, before we wrap up tonight. We haven't talked about Chris Barber and Big Red yet. The government wants it. They've had a couple of hearings, and by it, I mean the truck, Big Red. I'm not sure if you heard back from Chris or his lawyers yet regarding this situation. I know they've had a couple of hearings, and the latest one, Chris's family was involved in. So
I just checked my email there. On the forfeiture of Chris Barber's truck, Big Red, which has been in his family for 2 decades or more, and is his livelihood. On that issue of forfeiture, so that's separate from the sentencing. Okay, so the Tuesday, October 7th, there's going to be a verdict. The court is going to rule on a sentence, hopefully no sentence, but there's going to be a ruling issued on October the 7th for Chris Barber. The Crown's demanding 8 years. Tamara Leach, the Crown is demanding 7 years for conviction on mischief.
Yeah.
Their defense counsel, their defense lawyers, being funded by the Justice Center and also by the Democracy Fund, their defense lawyers are saying there shouldn't be any prison time. That's coming up very soon, next week, October the 7th. Now, this whole forfeiture application, next arguments are taking place in late November, the 25th or 26th, and then a decision thereafter. So it's kind of a 2-track. You got the sentencing thing, and then you got the forfeiture of the truck. 2 separate things.
So the forfeiture of the truck, there is no precedence for this because they didn't impound the thing in the first place, right?
That's correct. And the criminal code does authorize the Crown to apply for the confiscation of a tool used for a crime. So the legal issue was the tool.
I'm sorry, I have to laugh. A tool used for crime.
I mean,
come on,
a knife, a gun, but
they want it because it's a symbol of freedom for millions of
Canadians. That's probably driving the prosecution. But the legal issue before the court is, what was this truck used to commit the crime? And so Chris Barber's lawyer, as I understand it, is arguing that no, he parked it where directed to park it by police. He, like so many other truckers in Ottawa at the time, were following police instructions. Park it here, don't park it there. And when police asked him to move it, he did move it. There was a delay because, and I don't know if the delay was a few minutes or a few hours, but there was a delay because Chris felt it was unsafe to move his truck at that particular moment. But he did move the truck when requested. And, hopefully those legal arguments will carry the day, because it would be very tragic for a man to lose what his livelihood depends on.
they're going to ground, if they win this, they're going to grind that truck up into mulch, and they're going to videotape it, and they're going to make it a freaking special on the CBC. I guarantee you that's what they'll
Well, if they have any brains, they'll try to sell it at an auction and not destroy it. I've heard it's worth $150,000.
Yeah.
And so, you know, even if it was sold at 2/3 of its value, but we'll have to hope that the court will listen to reason, and we'll just look at the facts. And you know, October 7th will be a big day. And then, afterwards, the fate of Big Red will be a big decision as well.
John, thank you for joining the show tonight. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll get you back soon.
Thanks for having me on your show. Have a good rest of the night.
You too. There's John Carpay, Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I have more for you, and I'll be right back. Shadow at Night live stream brought to you by Nano-silver.com.
Silver is amazing. It has several natural health benefits, and it's been used for hundreds of years for health and healing. That's the main reason they made silverware from silver. But seriously, this nano-silver from Silverceuticals is the best and safest silver you can find. There are hundreds of studies and reports on it. I've read some of the studies myself, and it's mind-blowing. One of the things that sets Silverceuticals apart is that it washes out of your body in 24 hours. No silver buildup and no turning blue. And it won't even harm the good bacteria your body needs. It's so effective, they can use very small concentrations of silver, like 10 and 32 parts per million, and still outperform other silvers that have up to 3,000 parts per million. It's safer and more effective at the same time. It is an incredibly small particle that is small enough to work through your body, but big enough not to fall out of suspension. They infuse it into almost all of their products. It works in facial serums, toothpaste, gels, and even gummies that work to help your immune system.
All the politicians were out virtue signaling today.
We come together to recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and Orange Shirt Day. This day honors the survivors of residential schools, their families, and the children who never came home. It's a time to reflect on the lasting impacts of these institutions and to acknowledge the truth of our shared history. Today is a powerful reminder of the importance of standing in solidarity.
What truth is that, Doug? Can you tell us? No? Then stop the lying, stop the virtue signaling. It is just so transparent and contrived.
With our Indigenous communities across the country. Let us take this day to remember, to learn, and to move forward together. Thank you.
No, thank you. A couple of other things here before we get into the extension tonight. We've got a choice for you all access Nighthawks at shadowdavis.com. Now, I know, excuse me, we have a part 2 to do tonight, but we could do it tomorrow and run something else tonight. I found something that's actually very, very, very interesting that you guys might want to see instead. So if you're not a member at shadowdavis.com, an all access member, go ahead and become one. It's like $12 or $13 a month. And if you get the all annual pass, it's cheaper. You save like 2 months. Yeah. I think it works out to 2 months on the price of your regular monthly. So it's a good deal. You get all the extra content and more community back there as well. And if you are going to join, and by the way, I do have to say, you guys, that it really does help to support the show by becoming an all-access member at shadowdavis.com, just like it's spelled right down here at the bottom of the screen. Make sure you join Telegram. First of all, if you're not a member on Telegram or if you haven't got an account on Telegram, get one. And then join the Shadow at Night community there. It's warm, welcoming, and full of lively debate every single night. And there's a lot of interesting content that the members post throughout the day as well. So it's actually pretty cool. Let's look at this poll here from Left Wing Corporate CTV. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the show. I guess we could take John's name off the screen now that he's not with us anymore. As people across the country gather for the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And I believe that Justin Trudeau forgot about this day, the very first one a few years ago, and went surfing in Tofino instead, didn't he? He forgot. There's a new poll that suggests Canadians are divided about whether the country belongs primarily to Indigenous peoples. You see, this is what all those land acknowledgements has got us. This is what all the indoctrination in schools over the past 20 years has gotten us. That Canada essentially is no longer a country anymore. And if it's true that 38% of Canadians believe Canada belongs first and foremost to Indigenous peoples, would they then be willing to give it back? All of it. Your home, everything. Whatever property you might have outside of your home, everything. Are you willing to give it back if you're one of those 38%? If not, then sit down and shut up. 43% of Canadians who responded don't agree with that sentiment. 19% of respondents say they don't know, which means they're scared to say, which means they don't believe that the country belongs to First Nations. So let's put that 19 and 60 or 43% together, and we come up with 62% of people, and I know I'm assuming here, but I think I'm assuming correctly, 62% of people in this country believe that Canada belongs to Canadians, not first and foremost to Aboriginal peoples. And let me also remind you, there's something in Canada that's called the Canada Impact Unit. We've talked about this before. It's known more accurately as the Impact and Innovation Unit, which houses the Impact Canada Initiative. The IIU is a multidisciplinary team within the Privy Council office that works with government departments to address complex public policy challenges using innovative approaches like challenge prizes and behavioral science. I would believe that they probably manipulate polls as well. They were especially prevalent, I believe, during the election campaign earlier this year. Their goal is to deliver meaningful, measurable outcomes for Canadians by fostering evidence-based decision-making and reducing barriers to innovation within the government, according to the Impact Canada website. They're the ones that get favorable articles for the Marxists in all of the left-wing corporate media. They're the ones who get skewed polls or are allowed to formulate the questions of polls that then get asked by Leger, Ipsos, Nanos, and all of the other pollsters, so they can get back the answer they want. And I believe also that if they don't get back the answer they want, they'll lie about it anyway, because they're trying to get Canadians to believe in certain things and behave in a certain way. And now with all these hate crime laws coming down the pipe, I think they'll be expendable. I honestly think. Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board told to change flag policy to mark Truth and Reconciliation Day. This story came out last week. This Ontario Catholic School Board that made headlines for banning alternative flags, like pride flags, has been ordered by the province's education minister to change that policy, to fly orange flags on National Day, the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Paul Calandra's press secretary, Emma Tetstani, said the minister has directed the provincially appointed supervisor of the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board to allow the display of the survivors' flag September 30th, honoring those who were forced to attend residential schools. We're going to wrap this story with a couple of funny ones for you. Well, one that's every politician should be saying, and one that's kind of funny. This is our friend Jim McMurtry. He's been on the show a couple of times. Jim, a legendary school teacher in British Columbia who was fired for refusing to teach this lying curriculum of Indian victimhood in his class. And he's been fighting this thing in court for the past 3 years. Here he is in a Tim Hortons today wearing an orange shirt that says, "Where's the bodies?" eating a what he called a victim donut. with somebody giving him the finger. Love Jim McMurtry. Got to have him back on. And finally, Maxime Bernier. On this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, let's remember that no bodies were found, that the residential schools genocide is a hoax, and that reconciliation requires an end to the BS, the victim mentality, the fake white guilt, and the grifting based upon it. Thank you, Max, for coming out and saying what everybody is thinking. And even if only 62% of us in this country believe that Canada is for all Canadians, I think it's higher, then we should all come out and say it too. Every last one of us. And when I say that, what I mean is if you see an orange shirt out there, call it out. Because they're full of shit. And most of them who are wearing those shirts today are being forced to wear those shirts today through work or through school. Or maybe they were bribed. Hey, you get to go walk in the parade this afternoon and you get paid. I'm in. All I have to do is walk and wear this orange shirt. Yeah. And we all get to hang out together too. That's what happens. All right, that's it for the show tonight, you guys. The extension is coming up momentarily on shadowdavis.com for the All Access members. Maybe you're one by now at shadowdavis.com. The Nighthawks, I'll see you in just a second. For everybody else, I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I want to thank John Carpay of the JCCF for being our guest tonight. I will catch you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central for another one. Have a great sleep. Talk to you later. Bye for now.